So today, the workshop I'm doing is actually a request. So I did a workshop last week, or sorry, the week before last. And one of the suggestions that came out of it was to do a workshop, which I've never covered. Love when I've never covered something. To do a workshop on geometry. So geometry is kind of like it's many things actually in ACDC. It's kind of a broad category, but it's essentially working with the shape of your image output, and it's both present in develop and edit mode. And yes, it's very useful to understand. I'm sort of going to be talking about it, and also we're going to be talking about resizing your canvas, which is a very similar function to that of cropping, with some notable differences. So we'll go over the differences there and talk about their utility. Really important understanding, especially for finalizing images, especially if you've done any liquefying on your image or you've done any rotation or anything like that. Understanding cropping is a pretty big deal. So, also next week, I'm doing a workshop on watermarks. This was another request. So if you happen to have something that you would like to see covered in a workshop, I know that I have yet to respond to a couple PMs in over Connect that had some good suggestions as well. So I'm going to go over those and probably create some workshops for them as well. So thanks for those suggestions, but always open to suggestions for content. Happy to cover that. So okay, I hope everyone's day is going good so far. We can get started now. People filter in as we go. If you have any questions, just fire them in the Q&A panel. That makes it just easier for me to follow along. If there's anything I can't get to, I'll typically get to it at the end of the workshop. Yeah. All right, let's begin. So in ACDC, what we typically do is we typically open pre-existing images. And what I mean by that is that we've taken a photo and then we open that and we develop or edit it predicated on, already the dimensions of the image that our camera generates. Sometimes those images that we take with our camera have flaws in that they need to be adjusted for perspective. Sometimes we need to crop our images in that there's something in our image that we're trying to focus in on, or we're trying to eliminate or remove other parts of our image. Sometimes what we like to do is correct actually for the camera itself, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. And for composition images, for incorporating multiple images together, understanding how to expand and contract the canvas or the sort of space, the artboard in this case, is a useful tool. And so that's something to understand as well. What else is there in regards to that? Yeah, that covers a big portion of it, actually. We'll talk about those. So I have a bunch of photos from a trip my partner and I took to Mexico. And just a quick scan of these images, I noticed that like some of the perspectives are off, and I think they're a good place to begin in regards to our image. One thing to maybe understand before I look at these particular images is that when you can also create an image without a photographic sort of starting point. And so what I mean by that is if I was to go into this folder in particular and just go to File and New, it provides me this opportunity to create an image. One of the things to note is that when we create a new image, so what's produced is typically black or like a white background, basically, or transparency. And these images will have a set width and height associated with them. For example, let's look at the settings here. Hopefully everyone can see that. This has just basically I have a preset here for my last used settings. So just whatever I've created previously. And then I have a particular name for it and then a width and height associated with it. So in this image that I would be creating would be 5,000 pixels by 5,000 pixels at a resolution of 300 dots per inch, which is typically what we refer to as a print resolution. Just quickly, just as I've many, many years of working in print shops, there's resolutions that are appropriate for printing, and there's resolutions that are appropriate for web or RGB display. 300 is kind of the minimum for printing. It's the absolute required. You can have more pixels per inch in your file, and that will sort of increase the overall resolution of your image, meaning that your image has more pixel density than, say, an image with 72 pixels per inch. So 72 would be something that would be appropriate for, typically maximally appropriate for web. So if you ever see that in your images and you see like, oh, my settings are at 72 or maybe 150 is another common size that's kind of in between, or 300. Sometimes you'll see images set at 600 pixels per inch, or dots per inch rather. And this all indicates essentially the resolution, the overall quality of the file, the sort of information stored in those pixels. And then you have, in this case, the actual size of the image, the sort of width and height of the image. There's other things to consider when you're creating a file. One of the things is the aspect ratio. So when it says aspect ratio not preserved, what that means, and this is something that's very relevant when it comes to cropping, is that if your photo, say, is like, a certain rectangle, right? I'm here if I can do this from, there we go. If your image is a certain rectangle like this shape, preserving the aspect ratio means that it'll only ever be moving that shape evenly rather than having your perspective move like this or your perspective move like this, where it changes the dimension of the image. So aspect ratio being preserved sort of takes that shape and just makes it smaller or larger, but the actual relationship of the shape doesn't change versus that not being preserved, which means you can just kind of freeform change the shape as, and this will make more sense as we actually do it, but that's what that means. And then it has a background contents. Typically, it's either transparent or a set color. So why does this matter? Well, when we're cropping or when we're or when we're resizing our canvas, these are factors to consider because resizing our canvas will functionally make our canvas bigger than what it is. And as a result of that, it's going to have to put something in that place. And so one of those things that we'll see is something like transparency emerge in the space that that wasn't occupied by something. So just to think that something to keep in mind is that when we're cropping or doing perspective changes, we can be doing them directly on a image, like an image that we took in particular, but it also can be using like this method where we're looking at a brand new image that we intend to make like a composition image with. And what I mean by composition image is just an image that contains multiple images in of itself, kind of justified together artistically. So that's something where you can either be editing just an image on its own, or you can be editing a composition image. So just some initial terms to consider. Okay, so we have our image here. Let's open it up. Actually, you know what? Before we open it up in edit mode, I think I want to just illustrate some of these things in develop mode. I'll just showcase what we're actually looking at when we're talking about geometry. So I'll probably look at both develop mode and edit mode, but they are functionally the same. So if I take this and open up in develop mode, there's these 4 tabs up at the top here, and the one that is open by default is the one that deals with color and lighting. Within these other 4 tabs here, we have detail, which deals with essentially noise and sort of sharpness of your image, pardon me. And then you have geometry, which we're covering, pardon me, and repair, which deals with repairing is typically spot healing images, dealing with clone, and maybe doing some red eye repair. Yeah. Geometry, on the other hand, deals not with the content of the image, but rather the shape of the image. So things like lens correction, rotate, straighten, crop, perspective, and then this one incorporates vignette correction, which I would argue is maybe more of a tuning adjustment than it is actually a geometry adjustment, but it makes sense that it's placed in this. In develop mode, I think the way that develop mode works is that there's certain tune and detail adjustments that are applied, but they have to be applied in such a way that after any geometry corrections. And something like vignette correction, I think, requires you to actually change the shape of the image before any detail adjustments are applied. So they're all applied, I think, as one, but these considerations are sort of layered in a way. So I'm going to zoom out actually. So here's my image. This is one that I took when I was in Mexico. This has, it's not straight. You can actually see that it's not straight based on this line orientation or this grid that appears here. So it's taken in such a way that it looks like it's actually has a pretty egregious a difference here in terms of like this side of the fence. You can see that as the grid line runs through, you can see that it's actually on a bit of a slant here. And so this is something that we can correct using geometry adjustments. So maybe to start with the very simplest one, we'll look at crop. So cropping is where we would sort of draw a new shape or draw a new space that we want to sort of to focus on. And this would be what we actually, the area that runs outside of this bounding box, this area that appears in yellow with the yellow corners here. All of the elements that appear outside of this would be functionally removed from our preview, removed from our actual image here. Whereas this content that's inside of it is maintained, preserved, and presented to us. Just as is, I can show you what this looks like. This would be a crop example. So if I navigate actually back to Tune, you can see that that geometry is applied. So the image actually has become smaller. So one thing to note is that when I'm interacting in develop mode, there's this little blue icon here that appears next to the geometry tab. This indicates to me that a geometry change has been applied. And then by clicking on this, we can actually see based on this active group here that this little blue icon right here indicates to me that crop is said adjustment that has been applied. So when I navigate away, you can see that that adjustment is active. And now I'm tuning predicated on my geometry changes. Another thing to note is that when I navigate back to geometry, my original image is presented to me. So if I wanted to expand this, oops, not rotate it, but expand it, I could do that. And so when I do that, it'll add more content to the image. And when I navigate back to Tune, you can see that that change has been applied. Something to consider. One of the things to consider is there even a, yeah, it says constrained proportion, but it looks like that's being applied. Is that because, yeah, okay, so constrained proportion in this case is the term that is being used to describe what I said earlier when we looked at creating a, when we created a brand new file, one of the things is preserve aspect ratio was presented to us in that we wanted to make sure that, you know, if we're creating a new file, it would be created in such a way that if we increase or decrease the file size, the actual size of the width and the height, that aspect would be preserved. This, when I have constrained proportion active, you can see that as I increase or decrease the size of my crop, that is the aspect ratio is preserved. For an aspect ratio to not be preserved, I would unclick this and you can see that when I increase the size of these corners, those corners sort of can be moved and I can change it to more of a one-to-one square box here rather than say the rectangle, the orientation that I had at the beginning. One of the other things too is you'll notice that when I hold this corner, it isn't being slid with the aspect ratio preserved. Rather, what's happening is I can sort of move this up and down, which changes, again, the aspect ratio. It doesn't really preserve that. Whereas when I constrain the proportion here, the constrained proportion is going to be such that it looks like it actually would be equivalent to whatever the initial or original size of the image is. So when I do that, it holds that and preserves it basically actively. There's other considerations too. When I reduce the size of this actual crop presentation, you can see that the corresponding values or numbers that are listed here change as well. So maximally, it looks like this image is a 4,000 approximately by 2,200 approximately image. And so when I reduce those values, they're reduced evenly. Looks like the other thing to keep in mind as well is that we can crop at lower resolutions. Typically wouldn't recommend this. I think the only reason why you'd crop at a lower resolution is because you're finalizing a file and you only intend to reduce the file size because you intend to use it for something like web, in that maybe you're sharing this on Instagram or you're sharing it on your blog or something like that. And you want the file to be a lower file size because of uploading and not holding so much bandwidth on your website or whatever. Certain blogs, certain websites like Instagram are going to have like file size limitations for their uploads, and that's going to be something to maybe consider. However, I would generally speaking probably just keep the resolution at a higher resolution because it preserves the value of the image or the sort of the detail of the image. One of the things you're going to notice is that when we look at edit mode, a lot of these tools are very similar. One of the benefits I like about opening them up in develop mode is that they're kind of all listed very neatly here, whereas in edit mode, they're actually filters. Okay, so let's just undo all those changes. I just clicked the reset button, and when I do that, any changes that I've made within the geometry tab will be removed. And you can see that when I move away from geometry, there's no longer this blue icon here. And that blue icon is what was telling us changes have been made. So it's telling us this has been reset. Let's look at another simple one to understand, which would be rotate and straighten. So rotate and straighten gives me the ability to functionally rotate my image in either direction. And you can see that when I do that, it's going to crop the image, same way that I was cropping using the actual crop tool, but it's now takes my image and sort of reduces the size of that crop, I guess square in this case, and it is changing the image predicated on sort of a rotation of the image, holding, looks like as I go inwards, the box becomes smaller because it's drawing on the image itself. And same as if I move it in the opposite direction here, that's the case. As I get closer and closer to the standard image here, you can see that it sort of produces it as the largest value, or in this case, the sort of default size of the image. But yeah, this just gives us the ability to sort of quickly rotate and straighten our image. That one's pretty straightforward. Perspective might be a little less straightforward. This gives me the ability to essentially pinch these sides of my image and change the relationship that way. So if I'm pinching vertically, it's oriented towards I guess what would be that, a y-axis? This is x-axis. So y-axis. And then I can increase the size of my image, but what it's really doing here is functionally drawing the corner of my image and pulling it further away, right? And then the opposite of that would be pulling it, in this case, the opposite end further away or this end closer. This gives me the ability to change any perspective adjustments that, in this case, this image actually is fine on a vertical axis. It's perhaps the shear that is the issue. So just once again, horizontal axis is the same way. It's like taking the corners of your image and pulling them further behind. And the same would be for that orientation as well. Like I said, this isn't the particular issue in this image. The shearing is actually the image issue. So let's adjust it. So when I adjust the shear, it's maybe hard to see, but look at this line here with the gates line, and then look at the grid line. And as I move this upwards, I can sort of try to even those things out and make it flatter in this case. So I might address it that way. Oops. looks like there might need to be a slight, let's see here, vertical adjustment as well. There we go. So in this case, I've now made this much more obviously, much more horizontally oriented. And actually, if I go to tune, there's a way to show, oops, I guess I'd have to go to geometry to. So this is a pretty dramatic change in the way that this image is oriented, but basically by doing such, I've now leveled out based on cues, visual cues in the environment. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that this environment looked, but it is more pleasing. So if this street was on a slant, regardless of whether or not, this end might be lower or higher than the other end, which would mean that the lines are appropriate. What would Bruno ask? Is there a way to crop an image to 16:9 ratio, either vertically or horizontally? To crop an image on it? Yeah, let's see. I wonder if it'll allow me to use a ratio. Um, let's see here. 16:9. So this is a good question. So Bruno's asking a question about ratio. So the ratio is so when we take into account, let's just take a pause away from the perspective for now. That's pretty much all you need to know about perspective anyway. Gives you the ability to address x-axis, sorry, x-axis, y-axis, and then the shear, so the way that the image is pinched in those ways. So when it comes to cropping, so I've sort of glazed over this one aspect. So Bruno's pointing out the fact that he's like, I want to know how to crop predicated on a ratio, because the ratio is more important than the actual size of the image, or sorry, the width and height of the image. Those widths and heights are going to inform what the ratio is. Typically, the original ratio in this case is the ratio that the photo was taken at, which doesn't necessarily mean it's a set ratio. But there are set ratios. So if I go to crop here and I go to this little drop down box, original is whatever the ratio of the photo is, which will vary. And you can see that there's all these different ratios that we can crop based on. So the most obvious ratio in this case is the square. It's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning that I guess if we view this as a unit of 1 and this is a unit of 1, then it's a 1-by-1 ratio. So the height is a unit of 1 and the sort of I guess the width or the x-axis and the y-axis are considered both a unit of 1. And these change, right? Like a 2-by-3, right? So this, I guess the x-axis is now a unit of 3, whereas the height is a unit of 2. So meaning that the height is going to be lower than the width is. And so in this case, something to consider is that looks like 16:9. So we have a width of, approximately a unit of 16, and then a height of, in this case, a unit of 9. So 16:9 looks like almost half of, to be truly half, it would be 8. So this is its height is slightly more than half of its width. So Bruno, to answer your question, I've navigated to it here in the crop panel. It's actually the second object, or it's the section option here. And there's a bunch of different options here. It's sort of standard ratios. Follow-up question from Bruno is, say you would like to crop this horizontal image to obtain a vertical crop. That you would have to, I think, let's see here, rotate it to crop that same 16:9 ratio, but in this case with a vertical orientation rather than a horizontal orientation. So when I click on this icon right here, it changes that orientation. So this image is obviously wider than it is tall. And the value of that and sort of the natural or default settings are going to be always such where we're going to try to use more of the information. But so in this case, this image loses a lot of detail when we go to change the ratio to one that doesn't use the natural space of the image. But it is possible. And when you're taking images at such wildly insane resolution, so you're taking photos at 600 resolution, it's not going to matter. Like you might as well just crop whatever out you can. You can get three images out of your one image because the resolution is so high. So that's possible to change. So not only can obviously you can have your original orientation, but you can also move your original orientation to a vertical, uh, so just sort of rotating that crop space. So all that's possible. You can definitely address that issue, or you can crop based on a ratio. And the ratio means that in this case, the width and height aren't necessarily going to matter so much as the relationship between the width and height that you're cropping. Okay. That's a good question. Norm asked, can you demonstrate how to make the edge of the brown-faced wall plumb with perspective correction? Oh, yeah. We can try. So let's just undo. So this might be something I might have an easier time doing in edit mode actually than in develop mode, but we'll try. So plumb being we want, so this, if we look at this brown wall here, let's see here. First of all, we might rotate the image. We don't want to rotate it too much because obviously that would disrupt the image. Actually, let's just start like this. Okay, let's go. It has to be probably through shearing. So we'd have to shear like this, and then we'd have to probably shear a little bit vertically. So that's looking pretty good. So my two things, this is kind of wonky looking though. So, I mean, the photo was taken in such a way that, is there a way for me to, I mean, at a certain point, you have to allow certain elements to move because this might be something I would look at in edit mode to sort of see if I can work with that. But yeah, if you grab the corners here, you can sort of move that. But that's more of an edit mode function. In develop mode, you don't have the same ability to sort of address it in that way. But in this case, the brown building here is now sort of what we're considering straight, or we're turning that section here straight. And then we have the wall here as well that we've, made straight. And as a result of that, it looks like this building is viewed on a bit of an angle. But it does straighten the image out from that perspective. I'll have a look at this in edit mode because in edit mode, you can actually pinch the corners and you can maybe address that in a different way. Just gives you a little bit more control over the image. But that does plumb out the side of the building there. And in this case, right here as well. Bruno said, I usually start with vertical to recalibrate for my camera pointing angle. That's interesting. So let's just reset and give it a try. Maybe that's the most that I could do it without disrupting it too much. Mm. Anyway, that would be the way that I would approach that. I would use these shear functions to sort of address that. Well, let me see one more thing to talk about while we're still here. Oh, we haven't talked about lens correction itself. Um, so the maybe last thing I'll talk about before we look at canvas resizing, and then we can also talk about maybe trying to address this image using edit mode tools as well, just to see if they're a little more versatile. But lens correction. So this photo was taken on my phone. It was on a Samsung. And when you open up an image that contains metadata, so in this case, the metadata comes from the phone. It's a lot of that is filled out. I think that would be EXIF metadata. So maybe just to reiterate this, we'll just navigate back to manage mode for a second. Um, so let's see here, metadata. So I have this image here. This is the one I'm working with. If I look at manage mode and I go to the properties panel, there's a couple fields. First and foremost, there's the ACDSee metadata field. This contains like information you've added in ACDSee. Then there's IPTC. So IPTC contains broadly copyright information. And this is something you can fill out using ACDSee. You can fill out these fields in a lot of different softwares and even in just Windows properties in general. But these are just universal lines that are in these images that if you were to fill them out and then say, provide this image to a friend or something like that, and they were to look at the properties of the image, all this content would be filled out. So things like title, headline, caption, keyword, creator, etc., all relate to the intellectual property of whoever's taking the photo. EXIF is not that. I in regards to EXIF, this is something that all contains information based on the camera make and model and when it's being shot and in what sort of qualities. So f-stop, ISO, shutter speed, that sort of thing. But you also have the actual make and model of the phone. So in this case, it was a Samsung phone, and then the model it's a Galaxy A1336. But all that information is listed here. This will be the same for all of your camera information, your Canon and your Nikons, etc. So when we open these images in develop mode and we actually open them up in the geometry tab, one of the first things that comes up is lens correction. So lens correction, what it is our developers, what they do is they work with sort of these third parties that track sort of differentiation between camera models and sort of how these camera models interpret or are unique in the ways that they take photos. And then what we try to do is correct for those things using that sort of third-party open source information. And so, just to be clear right off the bat, there is not going to be every camera listed here where we've gone ahead and we've added that content. That's largely because a lot of the times this third-party open source information is being essentially deconstructed by really, really passionate users of these cameras, and they're trying to understand like what differentiates one camera from the next. So when it comes to lens correction, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to correct a lens to a stable, I guess, stable middle ground. And that's what happens when you go to turn on these functions. So if I was to turn on enable lens correction or enable lens profile, you can see that the orientation of my image looks like it corrects for a bit of a fishbowl. And so when I turn it on, it looks like almost the sides are being pulled. And as you can see, the make, it picked up pretty correctly. It picked up a Samsung. And then the model, unfortunately, my phone here is not listed because that particular model of phone has not been sort of converted or sort of analyzed yet. But there's a huge variety of phone models here for Samsung. And then if you go to like more robust manufacturers like Canon or actually make cameras, there's going to be oh god, I think there's hundreds and hundreds of models. And then you have more advanced functions like being able to look at particular lenses as well. So you have not only a particular, like this list goes on and on and on, but you also have the actual lens itself. So you can correct for the camera and then the lens. So we're constantly updating and editing these. If I go back to, let me just reset that. If I go back to the Samsung model here, and then it looks like, I don't know, this is a GX Galaxy 1S. And then you have the ability to take that profile that you've then corrected, and then from there you can also add personal or manual corrections to it. So this just gives you the ability to sort of operationalize and use these algorithms that the developers have been creating with third parties to kind of translate what the sort of what the particular, what would be the word for it? It's almost like unique quality of a camera to sort of correct for that. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to go back to manage mode here. Just going to reset the values of this. So that's fine. let's take the same photo and we're going to open it up in edit mode and sort of look at those tools as well there. So this is the same photo here. Um, the geometry tools are located in different places in edit mode. So as you can see here, I'll just collapse everything else here. But you can see that geometry is listed on the filter panel on the left. And these tools are broadly very similar. You might see a couple changes. It looks like liquefy is a change here as well. Liquefy, just quickly, is going to impact the geometry of your image because you're taking a set of pixels in your image and you're shifting their relationship. Just to show you what I mean. So liquefy is actually a really useful tool and very fun to play around with. But as you can see, as I liquefy an image, it's going to impact the actual geometry of our image because now there's a huge space at the top of our image where a transparency has been applied. That transparency is applied because we're moving pixels actually away from that space and it needs to have information to replace that. So in this case, it's replacing it with no information at all. So this is in many ways a geometry function because it's changing the relationship of your image here. I'm just going to reset these values because they're not actually useful to me, but just to give you an idea of what's also included here. Liquefy can be used to make small things bigger. Classic example of that is you can have your eyes in your image and you can just bulge those eyes slightly outwards. And this gives like an effect of, this is something when you don't only use extremely gradually, but it would increase the sort of the size of an eye or something like that in like a profile photo or something like that. So here's one of the things that's really important. So, and this is maybe one of the things that's very different from working in develop mode. Develop mode is constrained to the size of your image. Edit mode is not constrained to the size of your image. If I open up crop in the filter menu, you can see right away that I can't crop an extent of the file, meaning crop can only ever make your file smaller. Okay? But edit mode is interesting and it's unique in so many ways. One of the ways in which edit mode is unique is that it's not truly, it's more than just an image editor. It's also a composition image editor. It has files and layers in it. And so if I was working in a composition image and I wanted to add more than just one file to my image, if I wanted to add more images, right? For example, if I wanted to add another picture in this side of my image here, in the same way almost if I was doing some form of panorama image, or if I was making some sort of artistic composition, I don't have the room to add another image because this is the extent of my current artboard. So people always ask, what is the difference between canvas resize and crop? And I'm telling you right now, the difference is that canvas resize works almost the same way as when you go to create a new image, where I have the ability to change the width and height of my file. I can change the width and height of my file to be much greater than 5,000. And this is the case with canvas resize, where I can crop my image by decreasing the value, right? But I can also do the opposite of that. And by doing the opposite of that, I increase the overall artboard size of my output file. So when I do this, so now I've actually added extent to my file here. I've made my file much larger than just the original constraint of the image. So this is the big difference between crop and canvas resize, is that crop will only ever be diminutive or making your image smaller in this case, right? Where canvas resize can actually input nothing in these spaces here and make the image way, way, way greater, which gives me the ability to add new files, right? Like I can go in and I could just add a brand new file to my space, layer it, whatever, do whatever I want with this new image in here because now the actual canvas size can support this image. Whereas previously, I could have placed this file, but it would have been constrained to the actual original image dimensions. Also, when I'm in this mode like this, and when I've increased the file size, I can go ahead and move my original image, right? I can go here and I can actually move this in relationship with my canvas here. One thing to note, you can see that when I move these files, so what I'm doing here is I have two images within this broad canvas here. And when I click on the move tool, it'll change the relationship or the position of this particular, I guess the original file to, I guess the artboard of the background in this case. One of the things to note is I can also do that with my second image here. When I do that, I can move this as well. As soon as I go to reduce the size of my canvas, I'm going to lose that information. And what I mean by that is when I go to reduce the size of my canvas, even by just that amount, something occurs here where I am no longer able to see the extent of this file. So when I resize the canvas downwards, in effect, when I crop my image using either crop or the resize tool, I lose that information. So just be aware that when we're placing our files in edit mode, when I go to reduce a canvas size, if there happens to be any files in the image that extend past the artboard range, those are going to be functionally cropped. So something to keep in mind, but really useful tool when we're making composition images is the ability to functionally resize the whole image to make it much larger. So Norm asked, explain the difference of resize canvas in the tool menu. Let's have a look. I don't know if I've actually used this one yet. This might be the same thing. This will allow us to increase the size potentially. Let's have a look. I'm going to go back a couple steps. Let's go back to when I just had a particular canvas here. Let's see. Let's resize and see if it'll do the same thing. So resize here. Let's see here. If I increase this, let's say we'll increase the width to 5,000. And the height to 3,000. Oops, 3,000. Yeah, so I am changing the orientation of my image here, but it's stretching my image. Oh, I mean at the menu bar at the top. Well, anyway, if we wanted to talk about resize just quickly, when I go to resize my image using the resize tool, it's going to crease my image. But as such, because of pixelation in this case, right? So when I go to increase an image, I'm losing pixel quality because now those pixels are sort of operating, they're trying to be stretched out even further. So I might see some pixelation occur when I resize my image greater than what my image is. Just a note, but that's not what you meant. What you meant was tools, resize canvas. Oh, fun. Man, there's like way more geometry tools than I even am aware of here. Ooh, I think I know what resize canvas does. Okay, let's just go to 15 inches and hit OK. Yeah. So resize canvas works very similar to the resize canvas function in the main menu here. The difference is that it doesn't have an active user interface. It's just a sort of numerical values. So if I go to resize canvas and tools, as Norm has described, it gives me the ability to actually change the shape of my image or be additive to my, in the same way that resize canvas is from the toolbar. It allows me to reduce the opacity of the background, to preserve or hold or not hold the aspect ratio or use a new aspect ratio. It looks like it also allows me to anchor it to my image. So if I was to resize my canvas based on an anchoring, I could resize it this way. So let's go, I don't know, 20 and let's say 10. Oops, not what I meant. 20, there we go. It'll hold the image in the bottom right-hand corner. So they work the same way, Norm. This is just using numerical values than it is actually using the sort of the bounding box to do that. I guess the benefit of this is that you can sort of be extremely precise in terms of the value that you're working with. So if you wanted to be to make sure that it is exactly a certain layout or certain pixel percentage or centimeters if you want or inches, You can do that in this mode. I guess the other nice thing is it allows you to anchor the sort of base image. So it allows you to move it from, the center to the top, to the left, that sort of thing. But all these tools absolutely do the same thing as the resize canvas here, where it gives me the ability to increase and decrease. One of the things to note is when I do that, right, I can also increase these values or decrease these values from here. So if I go 100 and I go, say, 50, those values are adjustable here. So I have that same function within this menu as well. So there's two places to do the same thing in this case. Let's see here. Oh, right. So we talked a little bit about perspective correction and let's see if we can do a better perspective correction using edit mode on the same image. Might end up being the same, but we'll see. So geometry, perspective correction. Perspective correction in this mode allows you to sort of pull these sides. As you can see, it gives you a lot of movement, the ability to work with that. If I was to show the grid here, you can see the grid, and that helps me sort of make a decision on where I want to finally place my corners here. This gives me the ability to sort of center these out. Let's see if I can do that here. There we go. If I wanted to pull these inwards like this, like that. It's not as curved as it was in the previous example. I'll have to crop off this side in order to get rid of this white space. So that's now vertically oriented. This looks like it's pretty horizontally oriented. Looks good. Click done. And then from here, what I would do is I'd probably just go and I could either crop, like I said earlier, or I could resize the canvas down. And then we'll just, let's maybe reset these values. Oops. I would just pull these inward like that so that I'm getting rid of those corners in this case. Same sort of, it looks like it's maybe slightly less slanted than the one that I did in develop mode because I didn't have to interact with all the corners. But that would sort of be that correction again if I wanted to sort of straighten that out in this case and base it off of this being our right angle here, this fence and this building. Any more questions for geometry changes? I think that covers virtually everything that I'm aware of. We talked about, so basically placement of it in develop mode. We talked about cropping. We talked about lens correction. We talked about perspective. We talked about the differences between canvas resize and also cropping, and that cropping is always going to be making your image smaller, whereas resize is going to be, you can expand your image outwards. The other thing too is I guess we talked about like liquefy really briefly. I've done entire tutorials on liquefy. You can watch those on our YouTube page. But there's a lot of different tools. They're located in different places. They have different functions. Mike asks, can you get the tower level? Oh yeah, we just talked about this tower right here. Yeah, we can. I mean, I can try even further, but I think it might have to be. Let me show the grid again. That's not bad. Yeah, pull that edge up. Yeah. Still definitely straighter here. It's definitely a little bit. So yeah, but that would be. If I pull this down, yeah, just even slightly. Okay. So that's straight, maybe a millimeter off over here. Much straighter here. That I think if I was to just tighten this corner even a little bit, would be a bit better. Yeah, that's about, I think, as good as it gets for this image here. I'm not an expert of cropping. Let's see here. And I would just take this in here. But the other thing too is we do this with every interaction. We do this at a little bit of loss. As you can see, this is what we're losing, even more than what we lost previously. But benefit is we get to kind of control the perspective of our image. And also it's not a huge loss. It's like, a couple, it's like, it looks like it was overall like maybe a couple, like a centimeter on the top and the right-hand side. Bruno asked, yeah, I could totally, where could I share these? That would be kind of cool. Man, I really wish I did actually. Yeah, I can send it to you. I think I can send you an image through Connect, Bruno, if you want to play around with it. You're more than welcome to. Um, I will do that. Yeah, no problem. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I like that challenge. Is there any other questions for perspective stuff? Anything that I haven't gone over that people want me to go over? Um, that kind of covers it for today. We talked about, like I said, we talked about perspective correction, cropping, the difference between those and the different modes. Oh, the other thing, oh, you know what? I didn't mention this. Something to mention though. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Can't believe I forgot this. We can make a development adjustment of geometry. So if I wanted to create a preset of my geometry adjustments, okay, when would this matter? So you're working with a lot of the same images with similar geometry challenges. I can create a preset in develop mode and then apply that preset to other images in manage mode. So what I mean by that is this works the same way as any development preset. Let's crop my image. Yay, I'm out. And then create a preset based on that. So I have made a crop adjustment. It's active. I can see that. I can save this preset. And if you go to Save Develop Settings preset, you can save based off of your geometry adjustments. So crop in this case would be the one that I would check, but I could also go with perspective, rotate and straighten, lens correction, or vignette correction. And then from there, what I can do is just name this preset, crop test, and hit OK. And with that being saved, when I actually navigate away in back to manage mode, I can make selections. So if I select these 4 images, for example, I can go to batch and batch develop predicated on this particular one, which what was it, crop test? So I can take these 4 images and develop them in that way. So I've cropped these 4 images, and you can see that the development icon right here on the left-hand corner indicates that that has been adjusted and these have been cropped. Just to show you again, I'm just going to right-click, go to Process, and Restore to Original. And that will bring them back to their original values. Click on them, batch, develop, search for the development I've created, go to crop test and develop, and it will develop those images and you can see they're adjusted. So more than this just being something that you can apply to your individual images, you can also make presets predicated on these changes and then apply them to huge amounts of photos simultaneously. This is going to be way more effective in develop mode than it will be in edit mode. So while edit mode gives you greater control over things like resizing your canvas, and it gives you a little bit more selective control, like as we demonstrated with the perspective adjustment, develop mode is going to give you way greater control when it comes to creating bulk actions that you can apply to your images. Okay, that's it for today, folks. I really appreciate you participating. I will also be saving this workshop and I'll get it to our YouTube page soon. I have to do that for a previous workshop as well. So I'll upload some workshops to our YouTube page. And then on next week, I'm going to be talking about watermarks, which I've never covered in a workshop as well, which was also a user suggestion. So happy to cover that. Yeah, if you have any comments or questions or anything like that, shoot me a message. Bruno, shoot me a message and I'll send you that photo so you can play around with it. I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you so much for participating, friends. And yeah, if you have any other comments or questions, just always shoot me in a message over Connect and happy to reach out there. There are a couple people I need to get back to over Connect, so I will do that soon. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Norm. Thank you, Jan. Yeah, no worries with Norm. I mean, it'll be on YouTube, so you can rewatch it if you'd like. Thank you, John. Thank you, Arena. Thank you, Gord. Thank you, Bud. Thank you, Drury. Thank you, Armando. Awesome. Yeah, I hope your day is brighter where you are right now. It's so ugly out right now in Victoria. Thanks, Jean-Claude. Appreciate it. Thank you, Juicy. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Bruno. Sunny in Winnipeg. Love to hear it. I have a ton of family in Winnipeg. Fun to visit. Um, awesome. Okay, guys, I'm gonna mute my mic. Like I said, I'll keep the page open for I don't know, a couple minutes, and we'll like I said, I'll upload this to YouTube. Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.